is Antic, the Atari Games podcast.
And Bill would carry these tomes of books to the bathroom with him, and he'd read these books in the bathroom. I said, why are you doing that in the bathroom? He says, it's the only room in the house that has a lock on the door.
This is Antic, the Atari 8-Bit podcast. I'm Kevin Savitz. Bev and Bryan Wilkinson were part of Optimized Systems Software, the company that brought DOS XL, Mac 65, Action, Basic XL, Basic XE, and other products to Atari computer users. Bill Wilkinson was founder of OSS. Bev was his wife and Bryan his son. I interviewed Bill in December 2014, and he died in November 2015. As a small family-owned business, Bev and Bryan were involved with the day-to-day running of the company. This interview took place on September 25, 2016, in my dining room in Portland, Oregon. Bev and Bryan brought with them a variety of discs and photos and artwork, which has been scanned or photographed and is now available online. Check the show notes at ataripodcast.com for those links. Where should we start? I'm interested in how you met Bill.
How I met Bill?
Yeah.
Well, let's see. 1968, I graduated from high school, and he was at the Air Force stationed in San Antonio. He was a friend of my uncle's, and they had been stationed over in Wakkanai, Japan together. And they ended up when they came back to the States, they weren't supposed to be at the same base, but somehow they ended up at the same base. And I didn't know what I wanted to do after I graduated. And so I went down, thought I might think about joining the Air Force. And so my uncle says, no, you're not that kind of girl. Come down and see it firsthand, because that's where they trained everybody down there at Lackland. And so I went down to visit for a while. And I met Bill. He was one of their friends. And my aunt, Doris, said she had told him specifically to stay away from the house that night that I came in, because she was having a hen party, and where she was selling clothes, beeline clothes. And
Men not being invited allowed.
And Men was not invited, you know. And he came anyway because he I guess he was anxious to meet this girl that they kept talking about. So that's how we met, was through my uncle.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, he taught their kids music. And that's what we had an interest in common, because I played violin in high school. And so he ended up inviting me to just sit in on practice sessions there at the Trinity College. And they were preparing for the opening of the Hemisphere there in San Antonio. So I got to sit in for the actual concert in the orchestra, though I wasn't really part of it. I got to play in the violin section, and he was over there playing in the clarinet and bassoon section. So anyway, that's how music and humor is what brought us together.
Yeah.
So I was there. He was getting out September 17th, and he had told me he was going back to California. And I said, well, I'm going back to Michigan if you're going to California. No, you're not. You're going to come with me. He asked me to marry him, and that's how I ended up with him in California.
Wow. So what year did you get married?
1968 in October. October 26, 1968. And we drove across country from San Antonio all the way up to Michigan, Flint, Michigan area, and stopped by and saw his aunt and uncle in Indiana. And then we drove all the way back to California after we were married, and lived with his folks for a month while we looked for work. And then we ended up in LA, and we got an apartment in South Pasadena. And then he kept growing, and I kept, everything kept changing. So that's how we ended up together.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. So I know you have a brother, Bryan. Are you the older or the younger?
Older brother.
Just the two of you?
Yep.
So, all right. Right. So, which came first, OSS or you? What?
I was born in 1970, so 2 years after that, and then Eric was born 7 years later in 1977.
Okay.
Yeah. I think the company started in '81, so that would make Eric. Well, he was 4 years old, I think, when we started.
That sounds right. And yeah, it was originally out of we had just built an extension to the house.
A tiny den.
that became Optimized System Software there for a while. It was the little office at the former porch on the back of the house.
Cool.
Yep.
Neat. So, tell me about the beginning of the company. Whose idea was it, and what did you think of it?
It was mostly Bill's idea. We had Mark Rose, and then the Lawtons were involved in it, and we just decided. They decided that I could handle the phone calls in the beginning and all that stuff, and so we were in the house for a few months. I don't remember exactly how long we stayed at the house, and then we found a basement space that we could rent under some lawyers in town, an old Victorian house, and we were there 6 months, and then we rented a place above a Chinese restaurant, and we were there a couple of years, and then we moved to the last place that we were at. It was much bigger and more space to do production and everything. So, and then at the height, I think there were 12 of us.
Wow. So, and you told me that you were doing phones and shipping, building cartridges, getting the supplies together, payroll, whatever was needed done. That was what I did.
Yeah, everyone pitched in when it was time to put the cartridges and manuals together. Pretty much, we were all, gluing the cartridges together and putting the things in the the manuals in the binders and shrink wrapping it all, or assembling the boxes when we had the boxes, that sort of thing. So it was kind of an all hands on deck kind of situation.
So you're like making hundreds at a time, thousands at a time?
Hundreds at a time.
Hundreds, I'd say, yeah.
I think our biggest order that we worked on was like 500 at one time. It took us a bit to get it together, but it was a challenge, and we all stuck with it. Right. So.
And Brian, you told me that you were sweeping and putting the cartridge. I mean, you're a little kid.
It was actually by that time.
Just slave labor, you getting paid?
Exactly.
by that time, I was actually in my early teens. Yeah. So it would have been probably, I want to say, like between 82 and 88. Well, as long as the company was going. So I guess it was like the mid 80s, late 80s.
88.
Up through there.
I think we lasted to 88, just barely.
And I don't think I was involved as much in the later years, but more kind of in the middle years, basically.
Yeah.
So, tell me a story about OSS. We were looking through the stuff, and you're talking about these ads you made, and what don't we know?
What don't you know? Well, we had decided we'd gotten big enough we needed a manager. I don't know if this is something I should talk about, but we were going to a convention. Bill and I were doing a convention in Michigan, and we left this guy in charge. And when we called our lawyer to talk about something that had come up, and the lawyer said he couldn't talk to us, that he was no longer our lawyer. And that's when we found out that the manager that we had just hired had fired our lawyer and was bringing all his people in.
Oh.
Bill flew a cork. Needless to say, he didn't stay manager very long. I've never seen him blow up like that. He just came unglued. We all thought he was going to have a heart attack right on the spot. That's how upset he was.
Huh.
And so we decided, nope, we're bringing our lawyer back on board, and we're staying with what we're doing, and we'll just figure it out as we go. We weren't ready to make that. I don't think we would have survived that.
Yeah.
So, but in the process, we did do the fancy ads with the color ads, with the violin maker and the jewelry maker. That was the first time we really went out and hired an agency to help us. So those were models that were hired, and they wanted to show that it was a finely tuned machine, or it worked really well, and that's why they used these symbols, I guess.
Right.
Well, a lot of the earlier ads and logos and so forth, we came up ourselves.
Yeah,
it was actually kind of a family thing. I would contribute some ideas, and she would do some stuff. We both sketched things out.
I did the original logo, and
yeah. Well, we keep going back and forth on that. Who came up with it? But I think it was a little bit of both of us on everything.
Oh, you mean the wrench?
Bill had the wrench idea.
The wrench idea. There was another one that was kind of like a sunset logo, and
we debate on which one of us did.
Yeah, and then there's an even earlier one that was more kind of like it was the O with the two S's in the middle of it. And
right.
Yeah, I think we brainstormed it all together, and I think each of us remembered that we had
a part. Yes, we had a part in it.
So there's a little bit of truth in both versions of that.
Sure, there's a collaboration for sure. It sounds like
definitely
family. No, I love it. Just a little family business to make software tools and things.
Yeah, yeah. The kids were very much part of it. Eric played in the shipping area when I was making packages to ship out, and so it was really family involved. Yeah.
So tell me the story of the phone call and that you just told me before we started recording about the.
Well, Bill and Paul decided I could answer phones in the beginning, and because we were just getting started, there wasn't a lot to do yet, and we didn't really know how it was going to fare. So they put me in charge of answering phones, and I hadn't done anything like that before, so it was kind of nerve-wracking for me. But Steve LaRoe had called that day. I didn't know him at the time, and as he's talking to me, I hear the scream from the backyard, and I told him, "Can you call me back? I've got an emergency in the backyard. My kid fell off the swing. We're not really a big company. Can you call me back?" And he did, and then he ended up working for us, or with us.
Uh-huh.
So that's how that went.
Wow.
We would get phone calls from people asking if they could come see our building and where we worked and how we did things.
This is out of your house at this point?
Yeah.
Nice.
So it's like, no, I don't think so. We're too busy right now.
It was a pretty small community back in those days, though. I remember a story, actually, back when they were still with Shepherdson Microsystems, before we even formed OSS. They were, everyone in the company pretty much was working on playing. I mean, besides working on work, of course, they were playing this Sierra online game, The Wizard and the Princess, and trying to solve this thing. And it was all like kind of a group effort by the company, from what I recall. And they mapped everything out and had the papers on the walls and all that. And they got to a point, like near the very end of the game, they got this final puzzle, and they were so stuck there that finally, like, one of them, it might have been my dad, it might have been someone else, called Sierra to see if they could, find out how to get past the thing. And I think Roberta Williams or
Ken or Roberta?
Ken or Roberta answered, and because they were also a small company at that point, and told them how to do it, and they were able to get past that last stumbling block. And it's kind of funny because I've since then I used to go to the trade shows a lot with my dad. And it was always a treat for me as a kid to go to the trade shows and see all the various, they'd often have like a lot of like demos going on of games and robots and all sorts of stuff, especially like right after Star Wars came out. It was like, I remember the very first trade show I went to. I was still pretty young, but I remember everybody was trying to like make their own little R2-D2 kits, and they were running around the floor and stuff. But I think it was around 1980 or something like that, whenever Dark Crystal came out. And we were there, and I remember being really pleased to see that, like, when Sierra was booting up their demo for Frogger, that it actually, I think it was using Action or some other OSS product, and you could see that when it was booting up in the build that they were using. It was an OSS product they were using to do that port to the Atari. And I thought that was really cool, and I would go to the Sierra booth every now and then, and I believe Al Lowe of Leisure Suit Larry fame was promoting their Dark Crystal game at the time. And I remember meeting and talking about that because I liked the movie. And it's kind of a funny story because many years later, I became, I was a game artist for a while, and I ended up working at Sierra Online under Al Lowe, so on a couple of projects. So that was kind of a full circle there. Yeah.
And then what? OSS is coming along, and
the distributor stopped selling our stuff. I guess they could see that Apple was going to take over the market, and so we quit getting paid for product, and we just couldn't survive that. So that's basically what did us in, was our own distributors. So
I know they were trying to develop some product for the Apple at the time,
some
but
Pascal
it was
or something.
too late, too little, too late. I think is what happened with that. Yeah. I remember my dad talked about it some in the interview that you did earlier too.
Well, we put our house on the line. We took out mortgages on the house to keep the company alive twice. And when he suggested a third time, I said there would be a divorce. So we backed down on that one. So maybe I'm part of the reason it quit too. So I don't know.
Sometimes it's time to walk away.
Yeah.
No one to fold them, right?
Right. So that was hard. It was a hard decision because it was our baby. Once you start a company, it takes you over. It's like a child. You've got to nurture it. Yeah. So.
And we were definitely loyal Atari faithful back then. I remember yeah, basically all the computers I used growing up were Ataris, and especially when I was in high school, using the ST a lot for the word processing and things like that. And then, yeah, it was. I don't even remember. I mean, we had so many Atari machines back then, and then when we moved to Seattle, I guess we must have sold them off then or something.
Or just, who knows what Dad did with them? I don't know.
All we have left of that now is just a lone Atari 800 with the slipcover over it, and I don't think it even has any of the power cables or anything for that. It's just kind of sitting there in his office. So, but yeah, I kind of miss the old equipment now.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, that must have been I mean, maybe you didn't even. For a lot of us who grew up with one Atari, it must have seemed like heaven to have unlimited access to all that equipment, and plus the tools and the people and the...
Yeah, it was quite fun, and I remember also when I was going to school. Yeah, we were living in Silicon Valley in Cupertino, and some of the schools there were some of the first ones that were using computers in the classroom and all that. And I remember my classroom when I was like about 4th, 5th grade or whatever had an Apple II, maybe even 6th grade, and I remember just being kind of disdainful about it because it's not color, Atari's color, So, but yeah, it was kind of neat. Also, just since he was involved with the community, we would get a lot of the latest Atari games as they were coming out, and we had a lot of favorites like I remember Crystal Castles and Crush, Crumble, and Chomp, and things like that. And I remember Time Bandit. I know it was multi-platform, but that was really popular around the office. And gosh, what was it? But yeah, it's kind of funny. I remember he worked on this. I think it was the 7800. He did some. He like flew out to Chicago or something like that to work on that for a while. And he was pretty excited about the 7800 at the time, but we never actually got a 7800 ourselves, so never really got to play with that. But, yeah.
Did you play any games on the at all? Or?
No, not really. I was too busy doing everything else around the house.
Raising kids in the house and running a business?
Yeah, because I did a lot of volunteer at school and stuff, even with all this going on. And I was going to school myself. Yeah. So I don't know when I slept. So.
Yeah. So I interviewed Bill about 2 years ago this time of year, and then I believe he died about a year ago this time of year. I mean, can we talk a little bit about that? I mean, I know he was ill, but he was a little unexpected how quickly he died.
we thought he was going to make it for a couple of more years, and I mean, that was the plan anyway. Yeah. But it just took a turn for the worse, and there was no stopping it. I didn't know that he knew his days were limited at that point. He evidently when he went to the doctor the last time, I had fallen and broken my wrist, both bones in my arm here. Yeah. And I was not able to go to his last doctor's appointment because I was doing my own doctor's appointment.
Yeah, you were doing rehabilitation.
Rehabilitation, yeah. And
so I went with him.
Yeah, Brian went with him, and that's when they found out that the last blood work was not looking very good. And I had said something about the doctor didn't seem to want to talk to me the last time I talked to her about problems with Bill. Mm-hmm. It's like it felt weird, like she was writing him off, and I wasn't ready to do that yet. Yeah. And so I always, deep in my heart, I knew something was wrong. I just I sensed it and said something to him about, you're not going to die on me in the middle of this move, are you? No, he says, I promise to be here. But the last couple of dialysis, he had a lot of problems with his heart staying strong enough for them to keep the pressure up so they could do the dialysis. So they kept having to cut it short, and it kept getting shorter until he just missed one entirely. And the last thing that was happening was he was having some issues with, all of a sudden his brain started doing he started saying weird things and doing weird things, and what was I saying? Anyway, he just kind of went downhill really fast in the last 2 weeks. And anyway, I had called the doctor and said he thought he was walking, and he was just standing still with his eyes closed. He thought he was walking. And I called her. I said, something's going on. She says, well, I said he's on his way to dialysis. He wouldn't let me call her before when he was there, so I called as soon as he was out the door. I called, and she says, "Get him to the hospital." And so I called the nurse at the dialysis, and they had just hooked him up. And I said, "Well, this is what's going on, and if there's any problems, give us a call back, and I'll come get him." And she called 45 minutes later, saying, "This is not working. You need to come get him." So then Brian and Nico came over and got me, and we went over and wrangled him in the car because he couldn't physically move very well by himself at that point, so we were having to maneuver him, and he was just livid that we wouldn't take him home and let him rest. So we took him to the hospital, and he was just livid. But he didn't. That was also our anniversary that day. It was our 47th anniversary.
Yeah.
And so he didn't come out of the hospital after that. He was in there a week, and then then they started talking to us about hospice, and I kept saying no. He's going to be fine. And then he got pneumonia, and there was discussion about whether they should do injections or something for the pneumonia, antibiotics and that, and they could feed him by tubes because he started to not be able to swallow. And I said no, and the boys were kind of saying, yeah, maybe we want to hang on to him a little bit longer. And I said he wouldn't want that. And from his bed, we didn't know he was awake. I had the meeting in his room so he could hear. And he said, hospice. And I said, did you say hospice? And he says, yes.
Take me to the hospice.
Take me to the hospice. And then an hour later, he was in the hospital. That was Sunday, and he died Tuesday. So.
I'm not sure it came up earlier, but yeah, he was dealing with multiple myeloma, which is a blood cancer.
It attacks the bones very, very viciously.
He'd been fighting that for the last couple of years, and the dialysis was probably part of that. I mean, the kidney failure is one of the symptoms that can come from that, and basically, as often happens with people who are suffering from myeloma, he had a point where he was really on the mend and recovering, and that's where we thought we still had a couple more years. But then it took a downward plunge after that, and that was when all this stuff started happening.
I'm so sorry.
He was very, very fragile there at the end.
Yeah.
His bones were just riddled.
Oh man, he had so many.
His skeleton, his spine collapsed completely.
Yeah. You said he lost 6 inches in height?
He lost 6 inches in height and 125 pounds.
Wow.
And one time he was in the hospital, and in April before he passed away, he was in the hospital for heart issues, and he fell out of the bed in the hospital, and it broke his vertebrae in his neck.
And it snapped his arm.
And it snapped his arm, but they didn't realize he'd broken his arm until weeks later.
Yeah.
And he kept saying something about his arm. And when he went back in the hospital a couple weeks later, I asked, can you please x-ray the arm? Because something's going on there. It's either the cancer is attacking his arm now, or he's broken it. And then when they checked it, and sure enough, it was completely snapped right, midway there. And so he was dealing with that.
Yeah, he was quite the scrapper. I'll say that. I mean,
he tried hard.
Yeah, he didn't let anything get him down. That's for sure. And even when he was, as he was getting more and more affected by it, and we were in the middle of the move, he wanted to be fully involved in everything, and did not want to get away from that. He wanted to make sure that.
Yeah, the weekend before he went in the hospital, he was out there in the rain without his walker. He had to have a walker.
We tried to stop him too, and
he would not stop. He wouldn't let us. He would not stay out of it. He had to go help him supervise the garage.
Yeah.
All the stuff we were getting rid of.
Always had to manage everything.
But to tell you how he fought it and how he was so upbeat, when the twins were over, the twins were 5 years old at the time, and they had brought their scooters over, and they were riding their scooters up and down this ramp that we had built for him to walk up and down. And so he decided he'd take his walker out there with the twins. He's out there talking to them. Next thing I know, he's trying to race the twins on their scooter. They're on their scooter. He's with the walker trying to race the twins. It's like, what are you doing? If you fall down, you're dead. Stop it. So he was quite something.
Sounds like it.
He was a scrapper.
Well, you saved some of the stuff. You said you lost a lot of OSS stuff in previous moves, but there's stuff
This
here.
is the stuff we managed to hang on to.
Right.
There might be still some stuff hiding in the garage and storage, but this is what we.
Yeah.
Mostly Eric managed to do most of the big digging.
Yeah, we haven't
He
got-
deserves credit there.
We haven't gotten through all the boxes yet.
Yeah.
So
There's a lot of stuff that a person leaves.
I still haven't found my electric pencil sharpener that I use for colored pencil work that I do. It's still in a box somewhere. I went out and bought another one because I've been in the house now 10 months. I still haven't found that stinking rotten, brand new pencil sharpener.
I know that he still has, or we still have his. It's like a large, solid brass nameplate that Steve LaRoe gifted him back during.
Like a desk.
Yeah.
Sort of
Yeah.
nameplate.
Weighs a ton.
It's actually like a big, huge paperweight type thing. It's like almost like a small log, basically of solid brass. It's really heavy. But yeah, that's still in his office.
It's on his desk.
Yeah.
There's two pieces of art here that you brought to show me, which I will scan. And one of them is the spiral of floppy disks coming out of space.
Yeah, and those are those big discs that.
Yeah, 5 1/4.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, and you said you did the original concept art for this?
He said something about he saw the disc spinning, and then I did the original drawing of the disc. He said that's exactly what I want. We hired somebody who was an artist at the time, you know, because my art skills were not I didn't have any art skills at that time, so we had a professional do that, and that's his concept of my drawings.
So, okay, and this other one is a 130XC that's tricked out like a car, like a
Motorcycle or hot rod.
hot rod, right?
Hot rod engine, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that was Bill's idea too.
yeah,
You could see it.
Supercharged.
right.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Nice.
I want to say that Vortex of Discs may have also, that was around the time the Black Hole movie was out from Disney, if I recall. And I wonder if that some of the visual imagery from that might have helped inspire that.
Very well. Could
Yeah.
go.
Although he didn't like that movie at all.
I've seen it. Right. Right, you brought a big binder of all the like Inside Atari articles that he wrote, and just a bunch. Okay, awesome.
Oh, Orson Scott Card was his editor. Did you know that?
No, I did not know that.
Yeah, Orson's-
I knew he did some writing for Compute. I didn't know
Yeah,
he was-
Orson was his editor for the magazine.
Huh.
Actually, we have a copy of, it was one of the first couple of copies of the final edit, I think, of Ender's Game, it's in a binder. I think Eric put it in the binder.
No, I put it in
Oh, you put it in the
binder.
binder? Okay. Well, in any case,
Sorry, you told me that story. I remember.
yeah, I have a scan of the page. I can send you later. It's signed to Bill from Orson, and he talks a whole bunch about like how much he likes the Atari stuff and all that, and he had a bunch of specific things I don't even remember right now, but I think you'd like. I think you'd enjoy it if you saw it.
Yeah, awesome. So, Bev, what haven't I asked you about the Atari OSS days that I should have?
I'm trying to think what there's to say. I don't know. We were so busy and just keeping it going. You know, just an everyday thing for a long time.
Yeah.
So we had a lot of arguments how things should be. The guys did. The programmers would. There were some arguments about how they should approach things, and they would go to their corners and they rework it, and then they come back together again until they worked it all out between them.
Yeah.
So it was kind of fun watching them figure things out. And I didn't understand when he was working as a programmer at other companies before we did this, what was involved in doing a programming job. You know, it's intense thinking, and when you get into a mode where you're actually making some progress, you don't want to stop it.
Mm-hmm.
And I would get upset with him when he wouldn't come home for dinner. You know, it was time for him to be home, obviously. And but once we started the company and I started seeing how they worked, I started understanding that he really was wrapped up in a project, and he couldn't stop what he was doing. The mind was there. But one of the things he would do, he'd get a problem and he couldn't solve it at work or something, and he'd go to bed and he'd get up, bang out of bed in the morning. I've got it. I figured it out. And he'd rush off to work again. You know, this kind of thing. So he'd solve things in his sleep all the time. He'd get up and say, "Oh, I figured it out." I don't think he slept, but he was always working on stuff. He liked puns. He liked word puzzles and things like that. And he said he could see the words in his head, and he could see everything working in his head. It was just he had imagery of everything. It was really interesting to hear him talk about how he saw things. So.
Well, even all the way up to the end, he was he liked to frequent coding forums and basically give advice to people that were looking for advice, learning programming, that sort of thing. And yeah, he was constantly on those forums. Whenever he could get back.
Before he went in the hospital, the day he went in the hospital, he was on a forum.
Yeah. So,
He's all, he's like the son of that.
Punched over the keyboard. Wow.
I mean, after he broke his arm, he was still doing it like one-handed.
One-handed, like this.
I was looking back at his old forum posts, and I noticed that there was a certain point where he stopped capitalizing things. I know he was very, very well. Actually, his handle was old pedant because he was very pedantic about what he'd do. But yeah, I knew it wasn't like him to not capitalize stuff, so I realized that was where he couldn't do the shift key anymore because he's just doing it all one-handed. So,
Wow.
but yeah.
Yeah, he's kept working right up to the very end, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was working for G Gumball part-time.
Or
E-Gumball, sorry. E-Gumball, up until the very end, too.
Yep.
So
Doing some contract work with them, yeah.
he was not only doing contract work, but he was really instrumental in the survival of the company.
Yeah, I think he was like the chief technology officer or something
Yeah,
like that.
well, he was the only one.
Yeah, the technology officer in any case.
At the beginning.
Something like that.
He was really crucial to the company.
Yeah.
So, and I know that he was, John was scrambling there at the last months or so there. He knew that he was losing Bill and that he had to get somebody in there that knew things. So Bill was trying to work with the other person he brought in to it there at the last and
Get him up to speed.
get him up to speed. Yeah. So I mean, he stayed in there. So.
And Brian, same question. What haven't I asked you that I should have?
Oh boy. Not really sure there's too much else. I mean, I was just a teenager at the time, so to me it was more just more fun and games. I mean, I remember little things like, for example, when they switched over to the orange cartridges, and I was really floored when we got that because being at that age, I'm just like, oh, all cartridges look the same or whatever. And it's like suddenly like they got their own orange OSS cartridge. It's like, wow, this is really neat.
Make us stand out from the others, you know.
Yeah.
So I thought that was kind of cool putting those together when we first got them in. And just like, this is going to look great. We got this brand new, orange cartridge. But other than that, it was fun growing up as an Atari kid. I mean, besides being involved with OSS, there was a lot of other stuff going on in Silicon Valley. I had friends that worked at Atari, and I remember going to the game room that they have at Atari, where they have all their sample arcade games that you can play for free there if you're an employee or a friend of the employees. Yeah. And I later actually did some testing and some work with Tengen, which was a splinter off of Atari Games at the time.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of Atari in my blood because of how I grew up there.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I don't think I think my mom has more of the stories since she was more directly involved than I was.
Yeah.
So.
I was in the back room most of the time. I was always in the back.
I think I have what I need. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. I don't know how much help that was.
No, it was great.
Good to give some perspective, I guess.
Yeah, just get the story from the other point of view sometimes,
Yeah, if I think of anything later, I'll let you know. But
Great.
I didn't, I wasn't one of the programmers. I just watched them, how they worked and how they fought with each other and struggled through things and worked through stuff. So
Yeah.
it was interesting.
Well, some of the most interesting interviews I've gotten are from the women who have to deal with the programmers. And I keep getting, they were stinky, they never took showers, and they slept under their desks. Just like terrible stories about men, being men, or young men, especially. And
Yeah, there's many times he's been overnight working.
Yeah.
He'd not come home from work, so.
And I've listened to
You're
both.
just sure they're having an affair or something. Yeah, it's with the machine.
I've listened to the interview that you did with him and also with Steve LaRoe. I've been meaning to do the. You did one with the Lautins also, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I need to do that one still, but yeah. I got her to listen to just a little bit of the podcast.
I couldn't listen
before you
to. I couldn't listen to all of it.
I get it. Probably hard, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's still too fresh for me. He was a bagpipe player at Carnegie Tech.
Yeah.
When he was there for 2 years, his dad had a fit when he left school and joined the Air Force. Because his grandfather, his great-grandfather, his grandfather, and his father were all engineers, you know. So he was going to be an engineer. And then he was interested in this newfangled idea of computers, and his dad was just upset with him. So, never forgave him up to the day he died. He never forgave him that he quit school. But he didn't quit school. He went back after he took some classes in the military. And then when he got out of the military, the first thing he did was go back to school on the GI Bill and finished up his degree and got a degree in mathematics and computer sciences. And then he just started in. He worked at Aerojet first, and then it went. I can't remember all the order because he just kept changing companies. That's the other thing his dad didn't understand, because he started working at this company and he died going into that company. He retired from that company.
You're a company man. You stayed there for 30, 40 years. Yeah. Right.
Well, in the computer industry, you can't do that. If you stay in one thing, you're not gonna stay working.
Yeah.
So and Phil would carry these tomes of books to the bathroom with him, and he'd read these books in the bathroom. That's what I said, why are you doing that in the bathroom? He says, it's the only room in the house that has a lock on the door. So,
Nice.
But he's always learning, He never stopped.
Yeah, I remember he said something on the coding forums once to somebody who was, I don't remember, I think they were like in their 50s or 60s, and saying that they're too old to learn a new programmer. Or he's like, what are you talking about? I just learned this program. It's like you're never too old to keep learning this stuff. So
he's always mentally busy. He just stayed active. So yeah, and there's so many products that he worked on over the years that we use now and take for granted. Like he worked on the first handheld calculator when it was being developed. He worked on that. The pins the stylus now that you use on the computers, he worked on the beginning idea of that. They actually had one where you could write onto with a stylus on the screen, and the scanners that they use at the supermarket. He worked on that. He did work on that. He did something with CB radios. He did something with that. I don't know. He worked on a lot of stuff.
I remember
he was involved in it.
I remember hearing in high school he was in the ham radio club or something like that.
Yeah, he
so
was.
He probably had some interest in that.
He had his own ham radio when he was a kid.
Yeah.
So.
Are you still recording?
Yeah.
Oh.
Sometimes the best ones come when you think you're
It's like
done.
after we thought we were done, but yeah. That was best. Yeah.
Well, he had the chance to join Apple in the beginning there. And in fact, Wozniak and Jobs had tried to get Shepherdson's Microsystems to join forces. And the big thing was that they're still working in their garage, and they got this long hair, and they're just such flakes. So they didn't go that route. I think that's funny.
I remember hearing Steve Jobs and Wozniak were in your kitchen at one point, or
yeah, I served them coffee and cookies one time.
Wow. When they were still trying to shop around the Apple back then or whatever. Yeah.
They were trying hard to convince them to come over. Yeah. So join up with them. They just bet on the wrong machine. Is all it is.
Yeah.
Hindsight's always 20/20. So
Dad was definitely pretty fiercely loyal to the Atari while it was alive.
Yeah, he sure was. Yeah. He loved that machine. Yeah, moved into the new house. He's got his office. I set up his office.
Oh, that's sad.
I know. It's just he's got his pogo collection and stuff that I put up there. I don't know what I just want to keep him there, I guess.
If you enjoy these interviews and would like to contribute something, I encourage you instead to donate to one of our favorite organizations, the Internet Archive, at archive.org. The Internet Archive is a nonprofit digital library with the stated mission of universal access to all knowledge. They've done incredible things to preserve computer history, including hosting thousands of programs in an in-browser Atari emulator, creating the Wayback Machine, and offering full-page scans of countless Atari computer books and magazines. Make your tax-deductible contribution at archive.org/donate.